The story goes that it began at a party. A golden chest stood in the middle of the hall, built in secret, measured to fit exactly one man in all of Egypt. The host proposed a game. Whoever fits the chest may keep it. And one by one the guests climbed in, and one by one it fit none of them, until the king of Egypt himself lay down inside. The lid slammed shut, and the god who sealed it was his own brother. You know the man in the chest. He is the green-skinned king on 1,000 tomb walls, arms crossed over his chest, holding the crook and the flail. Every pharaoh who ever ruled dressed for death in his image. Because this is not just a murder story. This is the murder that built the Egyptian afterlife. This is Osiris, the murdered king who came begin before the chest. In the beginning, the Egyptians said, the earth and the sky had children, and the firstborn was Osiris. He became Egypt's first king. And the memory that survives of that reign is startling for a god of the dead. They remembered him as the good one, the king who taught the valley to sow wheat and barley, whose reign set the standard every king after him swore to uphold. They called him Wennefer, the beautiful one. He ruled with his sister and wife Isis, the greatest worker of magic Egypt ever imagined. And he had a brother, Set, god of the desert and the storm, of disorder, of everything red and dry, and outside the green line of the river. The elder brother had the throne, the harvest, the love of the land. The younger had the wastes. The Egyptians did not need to explain what happened next. Every family already knows this story. Now here the record does something strange. The oldest traces of this story are carved inside the pyramids themselves. In texts from around the 24th century before Christ, the earliest religious writing Egypt ever left us. But the Egyptians would not write the murder down. They believed the written word had power, that to inscribe a thing was, in some measure, to make it so. And so for thousands of years, they told the death of Osiris around its edges, and some texts flatly denied he had died at all. The full story, the banquet, the measured chest, the game, survives in a connected telling only from a Greek, Plutarch, writing more than 2,000 years after those pyramid texts. Scholars still argue over how much of his version is truly Egyptian, but the spine is old and sure. The good king was betrayed by his brother, sealed shut, and given to the Nile. Plutarch says 72 conspirators stood in that hall and watched the lid come down. The river carried the chest north, out of Egypt entirely, to the city of Byblos on the Phoenician coast. There, the story becomes stranger and sadder. A tamarisk tree grew around the chest, swallowing it whole, and the king of Byblos, admiring the tree, cut it down for a pillar in his palace. Inside that pillar, Osiris died, and Isis went looking. The queen of Egypt crossed the sea, disguised as an ordinary older woman, won a place in that foreign household, and asked for a single strange payment: the pillar. She cut her husband's body free of the wood and carried him home to Egypt and hid him in the marshes of the delta while she gathered what she needed to work the greatest magic of her life. Set found the body first, and this time he left nothing to chance. He cut his brother into pieces, some said as many as 42, one for every province of Egypt, and scattered them down the length of the Nile. If a body was the seat of the soul, then no body, no Osiris. Not anywhere, not ever. What Set had not counted on was grief that refused to stop. Isis and her sister Nephthys went down the whole river, searching, mourning in the form of kites, the birds of prey that travel farthest in search of the dead. Piece by piece, province by province, they brought the king back together. All but one part which the river kept. The late telling says a Nile fish had eaten it, and Isis restored what was lost by magic. Then the gods did something no one had ever done. Thoth, the god of knowledge, and Anubis, the jackal-headed embalmer, the god whose story we told last time, bound the broken king back into one body, washed, anointed, wrapped in linen. The first mummy. Every mummy Egypt ever made, every pharaoh bound in linen for 3,000 years afterward, is a copy of that one body. And over the wrapped king, Isis became a kite once more and beat life back into him with her wings. In that impossible moment, between death and whatever comes after, she conceived a son, Horus, the heir the murderer never saw coming. And now, the twist that makes this myth Egyptian, and nothing else. Osiris came back. The magic worked, but not all the way. A king who has died, the Egyptians understood, cannot simply walk back into the sunlight and resume his reign. His revival did not return him to the world of the living. He descended instead into the Duat, the hidden country of the dead, and took its throne. Think about what that means. The Egyptians looked at the best king they could imagine, murdered and restored by the strongest magic there was, and their honest answer was, even he does not come back to this world. He comes back in the next one. Resurrection for Egypt was not a return. It was an arrival. The throne of the living passed to his son. Horus grew up hidden in the Delta marshes, fought his uncle for Egypt, and won it. And from then on, the Egyptians said, every living pharaoh sat the throne as Horus, and every dead pharaoh became an Osiris. The state itself ran on this myth. Kingship on one side of death, and on the other, the king. But Osiris never really left Egypt at all. The Egyptians saw him every single year. When the Nile flooded and drew back, leaving the black, breathing silt that fed the whole country, that was Osiris, and in later ages they said the flood itself was the tears of Isis, still mourning him. When the grain stood up green out of that black soil, that was Osiris risen again. They did not keep this as a metaphor. At his great festivals at Abydos, nearly 4,000 years ago, crowds from all over Egypt watched his death and return performed in public, mock battles and lamentations sung by two women in the roles of Isis and Nephthys. And in their tombs, Egyptians left one of the most quietly moving objects archaeology has ever recovered, a bed of Nile mud, shaped like the god, sown with grain. Sealed in the dark beside the dead, the seed would sprout. When excavators unwrapped them, long after, they found the growth still there, seed that had risen in a grave. That was the promise of Osiris, planted where the dead could hold it. A murdered king, a patient grief, a body made whole, and a life that comes back, not here, but somewhere. That is the machinery of the entire Egyptian afterlife, and it was built from this one story. Because here is the final piece. If every Egyptian hoped to become an Osiris, there was a condition. Before the dead could enter his kingdom, they had to pass through one room. In it stood a set of golden scales, a single white feather, and the jackal-headed god we already know, waiting with a steady hand, your heart against the truth. Next time, we walk into that room, the weighing of the heart.